So the webinar is in two parts. There's the presentation part. So we've got 3 speakers for you tonight, some exciting speakers for you. And then the second part of the webinar is a question and answer, and that's based on questions all of you have sent to us. If you have a specific question about your property, we'll follow that up individually with you. And so Helen is running our slides this evening, and our speakers are Kim. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hiya, I'm Kim Gilden, Head of Residential Engagement for LCDM.
Thanks, Kim. And Dean?
Hi, I'm Dean Western and I'm the Surveying Lead for LCDM.
And Martin?
Thanks, Ian. Evening, everyone. Martin Hancock, Head of Repairs for LCDM.
And from our resident liaison team, we have Jan. Jan, would you like to say hello?
Hi, I'm Jan Mills and I'm the Resident Involvement and Scrutiny Manager.
And Hanawe?
Hi everyone, I'm Hanawi. I'm the Resident Involvement and Scrutiny Manager for the North London region.
And we've got Becca Beeling, who is our Project Director Lead for Damp Mould. If Becca, you'd like to say hello?
Hi, so I'm Becca. I'm the Project Director for Leaks, Condensation, Damp Mould. So Kim's team and Dean sort of sit within my area, and you'll hear a bit more about what we do in that space over the course of the webinar tonight.
Good, thanks, Becca. So this is our first of a series of webinars. It's a new thing for us doing this. And the reason we chose this topic was because we wanted to provide more awareness and solutions for damp and mould. And hopefully through this webinar, you'll get some focus on the most important things you asked for as part of the survey work and the questions that were posed to us. So hopefully look out for all of that. There's lots of good hints and tips and advice and things we can do to support you if you have damp and mould in your home. Right, I'm now going to hand over to Martin, who is our first speaker. So over to you, Martin.
Thank you. So I want to start by just going through what LCDM means, what it means to us at Clarion, and essentially what each of those letters stands for, because you'll hear it a lot throughout this presentation. So essentially it stands for leaks, condensation, damp and mould, and we'll refer to it as LCDM throughout to save having to repeat those words constantly. But for leaks, for instance, as you can see there, there's various types of leaks. The one in the image there, quite an obvious plumbing leak. Essentially, the LCDM team will deal with certain types of leaks, ones that are particularly persistent or especially challenging. So they might be coming from the property above and have access issues that require the additional support from our resident liaison officers, or perhaps they're concealed within the structures of the building and require a more specialist approach or a surveyor's input to help try and resolve those. The routine leaks, such as the one in the image there, or leaking taps and valves, they'll be picked up still through the usual repairs process and are managed by the responsive repairs area managers. They do still have the ability, though, at any point to escalate those difficult cases that they come across into the LCDM team for that additional support and guidance. And essentially, if they feel we need to take that over and run with it and lead it a little bit, then that's what we'll do. So moving on to condensation. So what do we deem as condensation? Well, when we say condensation, we're kind of referring to excess condensation, so the formation of the moisture particles on the cold surfaces, like you can see in the image there, because almost all properties will experience condensation in certain conditions at some point, and a small amount is perfectly normal. It just requires a quick wipe to clear. But the LCDM team will become involved when the levels are anything out of the ordinary that could lead to mould growth. Or damage the elements within the building, such as the windows, if they're wooden windows particularly, or window sills and things like that. So we'll attend these, we'll try to ascertain what the cause might be, and I think we're quite open and honest about that. We'll always try to ascertain what the cause might be. We may not be able to do that first time round, and may need to re-attend, or arrange for an LCDM surveyor to attend if we can't identify what it is, or it's something slightly more complex. The difficulty with condensation is it's not obvious sometimes whereas with leaks it can be fairly obvious to get to the bottom of. So they can require a bit more investigation and a bit more support to figure out the cause and how to prevent it recurring, because that's the aim. Prevent the issue reoccurring, provide that long-term solution, as well as support to the customers and the residents with what the possible causes might be and how we can try and prevent those in future. So onto the D for damp. So what do we deem as damp? Well, essentially it's fairly obvious. It's wet patches on what porous surfaces usually, such as walls and ceilings. The difficulty with damp is there are multiple types of damp, obviously including rising damp, or damp caused by leaks, especially roof leaks, obviously when they're found on the ceilings and high places within properties. Because there's numerous causes, it can be quite challenging to identify and treat those causes. So if we do come across or suspect something like rising damp, then we'll always arrange for a surveyor to attend. They'll take those damp meter readings, they'll use that specialist equipment and look into the cause of that rising damp and arrange the relevant repairs to be able to resolve that and prevent those issues coming back again. And finally, we've got mould. Mould being a fungi that grows in kind of damp and poorly ventilated areas within properties. There are literally thousands of types of mould, over 100,000 in fact. However, the initial treatment for all these different types doesn't really vary. We use specialist non-toxic water-based multi-stage treatment that will kill the visible spores. It then penetrates through the surface to kill the spores that are kind of hidden or buried just below the surface. And then we apply an anti-mould prevention barrier in the final stage. And the key to treating and resolving mould is preventing the moisture and the nutrients and the oxygen that will allow it to grow. So by preventing the moisture, it may be that we need to install additional measures such as extractor fans, or it could just be as simple as supporting a customer with the importance of ventilating properties and using trickle vents on windows, or maybe not having the furniture pushed up against the wall so it allows that airflow. But every situation is different. But essentially, it's removing that moisture and conditions that mould likes to grow in. For removal of the nutrients part of that and the prevention of oxygen, that's where those specialist products really play their part. They'll kill off the spores, they'll then form that barrier, preventing the access to those nutrients within the surface, which in turn then makes it very, very difficult for mould to return and grow back through.
Thank you, Martin. Hi, everyone. Right, so the causes of LCDM. So if we look at some of the causes, we all know that most households will experience some form of LCDM within their home. This is either due to a defect or because warm air in our homes comes into contact with colder surfaces, such as external walls or windows, resulting in a moisture build-up. This is why you will notice that moisture and mould is mostly around these areas in the winter months. When we look at damp in our homes, most often it's due to either leaks, defective roofs, downpipes, gutters, entry points around windows or doors, or a combination of defects allowing water to get into the structure. Or it may be damp as a result of a breached damp proof course, DPC, where the ground levels outside are too high. But it's important to note that not all properties have a DPC, as older properties before the 1940s were built of solid brick walls, running continuously from the outside to the inside, and then covered with an internal plaster finish. These older properties were built with lime mortar joints so that the face of the brickwork, when wet, would dry out naturally, allowing water to evaporate over time. Although the more modern properties built after the 1940s have a DPC, which is a continuous barrier running across the building to prevent the passage of groundwater from getting into the structure of the building. The main reason for the DPC being breached may be the paving outside the property is too high, or there's a build-up of soil, or someone may have planters directly outside, which is allowing water to sit and get into the brickwork above the damp-proof course. So now, if we look at mould, we know in most cases it can easily be seen and identified and is frequently found in wet and damp indoor areas. Although we need to also be aware that not all mould is visible due to its location, and in these cases you may only experience a musty or earthy odour that indicates its presence. So, LCDM preventions. There's a number of preventions to reduce LCDM, such as heating a home effectively. That's why it's important to understand that if your home is cold, you are more likely to suffer from condensation. It's about getting the right level of heating in the right areas of your home. This can be done, for example, by using your thermostat to keep a steady temperature of between 18 and 21 degrees. If we look at other rooms that create excess moisture, such as the kitchen or bathroom, it's best to try and keep the radiators on at a constant lower temperature. And where you've got rooms that are not used as often, try to turn down the thermostatic radiator valve to a lower setting. And when it comes to ventilation, it's important to ensure that the air is flowing around the home to reduce condensation buildup. And there's several different ways that you can ensure your property is being ventilated. This can be done by opening windows to allow cross ventilation from room to room, opposite ends of the property for at least 30 minutes, keeping your trickle vents open and allowing windows to allow constant airflow. When bathing or cooking, ensure that a mechanical extractor fan or cooker hoods are switched on and working effectively. It's also important to allow air to circulate around furniture to reduce mould forming behind them. Where necessary, move furniture away from the outside walls, and where you can, try to put them against internal walls and leave a 50mm gap around to allow the air to circulate all the way around. It's also important to think about the relative humidity that's being created within the property. In the home environment, it's good to try and keep this within the region of 45 to 60%. It's also important to look at the insulation in our homes, understand where and how they work, how heat escapes, and what we can do to reduce the amount of heat loss in our homes. This can be done by understanding the age and type of the property, looking at the existing insulation around the home, identifying if the lost installation is present, and if so, does it meet the current standard thickness. Another preventative measure can be to install property sensors in the home. This measures the internal temperature and humidity levels to get a clear picture of how the property performs and identify what the likelihood risk is of condensation and mould occurring in the home. So now, if we look at preventing mould from growing and spreading during the winter months, there's several measures that you can take to prevent mould and improve mould allergy, such as reporting leaks as soon as possible to prevent water collecting, using mould cleaning products in bathrooms and areas of your kitchen where moisture and mould collects. Always use the extractor fan during showers and baths. Keep trickle vents open on windows and report blocked gutters to prevent moisture from building up on collected debris. If we look at other contributing factors for condensation and mould in the home, could be individuals or households require support or advice on how to effectively control their heating or ventilation systems and when's best to use it. And at Clarion, we can provide guidance and support on effectively using these systems if a resident feels that they cannot afford to run their heating or their ventilation systems due to the cost of living. We'd look to put you into contact with our money guidance department, who may be able to assist and provide support. So, the role of a surveyor. As Martin explained, an MTO will attend in the first instance and will assess and look at what the issues are within the property. Once they've done their assessment, if they feel that the works required are more complex to diagnose, then they will request for a surveyor to attend. All our surveyors are trained to diagnose these more complex issues in homes and will focus exclusively on finding the root cause. They will look to obtain as much information as possible during their visit and may ask various questions relating to the history of any LCDM to get a clear picture of when the issue started, for how long it's been going on for, and whether the issues are only occurring when it rains. The surveyor may also ask questions relating to the frequency of using the heating or ventilation systems and discuss any difficulties you may have with using them. During the surveyor's inspection, they will carry out the visual inspection of the outside of the property, both vertically and horizontally, looking at any structural and non-structural defects affecting the building and the surrounding areas, which will consist of, but is not limited to, comparing outdoor ground levels to the inside floor levels, check the condition of all rainwater goods for blockages or fractures, check the condition of the roof covering and chimney for damage, check the external wall finish for defects, such as the bricks, the pointing and the rendering. Look for evidence of any defects or blocked drainage systems. Once they've done that, the surveyor will also carry out a visual inspection of the internal affected areas rooms inside the property, examining all locations for any signs of LCDM. During the inspection, the surveyor will also look at the type of ventilation present, such as any trickle vents to the windows, passive wall vents, mechanical ventilation fitted to the kitchen and bathroom, and check to ensure these are free from blockages and working effectively. The inspection will also include looking at the heating system, identifying any leaks or damage, looking at the size of the radiators to ensure they're the correct size for the room property. If the property has a loft space, the surveyor will inspect the condition of the loft space, looking for any signs of water ingress, and check whether there is adequate insulation fitted and whether it needs to be topped up. Once the surveyor has completed their inspection, they'll be able to discuss their findings and advise on any remedial works required. Okay, so surveyors, when they carry out their inspection, they carry a number of different devices, equipment that they can use to assist with their inspection. So in addition to their visual checks, they may use various tools, devices to examine the property, checking areas such as walls, ceilings, timber and radiators for any symptoms of damp, cold spots or leaks that would otherwise be invisible. The surveyor may use an electrical resistance meter, which measures the moisture or dryness present in wood. The meter shows the level of moisture or dryness by using a traffic light system from green to red. So this would identify whether the area is dry, it's at risk of being damp, or it's wet. If the surveyor is looking to obtain accurate readings of the temperature and humidity, both outside and inside of the property, then they may use the thermo detector. This will assess the risk of mould forming or cold spot areas. Using this device can capture and record all of this information onto any photos that are taken at the time of the inspection. Another tool that the surveyor may use is a thermal imaging camera to identify areas of heat loss and temperature differences in parts of the building, along with identifying any cold spots in radiators or hidden leaks in walls or ceilings. But whilst the surveyor is on site, they may also discuss installing a surveyor cube for a couple of weeks or months in the property. This will allow the surveyor to monitor the temperature and relative humidity throughout the day and night, identifying where there is a risk of mould. This will also assist the surveyor in determining what preventative measures or works may be required to prevent or reduce a reoccurrence. The surveyor will also be able to provide support and guidance with any questions or concerns that may be related to LCDM while they're on site. I will now pass over to Kim.
Thanks, Dean, and evening, everyone. Nice to see some familiar faces from the recent resident focus group. So hello again. So I'm just going to talk through how to report LCDM. The main one is online, and we've recently added that, so I'm really pleased that it's an additional option for residents to book an LCDM appointment. It's available 24 hours a day, so you can book your appointment at your convenience. You can cancel it, you can amend it, and if there isn't an appointment time available, then it will go through to Martin's team and they'll give you a call back and get that arranged for you. There's other options as well on the website, like checking your statement, changing your contact details. So it's the website and the online account is a really good way of accessing appointments. And if you need some support with that, we've got a free webinar you can join and a digital support team that can help you with that. There's also live chat, which puts you straight through to one of our trained advisors. Again, there's a virtual assistant that's available 24/7, or during our office hours, then you can chat to someone directly. And obviously, you know, if we know that not all of our residents can access the online services, so you can call us. Phone lines are open 8:30 in the morning till 5 o'clock at night. So if you've got an issue, give us a call.
Thanks, Kim. So we've heard there obviously how different ways we can report these concerns. So what happens once they've been reported? So as Kim says, there's many different avenues you can use to report into the contact centre, via online reporting tools, perhaps to your local housing officer in person. We've also had LCDM issues or concerns raised as part of previous webinars, consultations, this one for instance, and these are all picked up and are being addressed as well. So those are different ways that we can get that information into ourselves to be able to come out and deal with it. So once we've got that initial report, what happens then? So they can also obviously come from other internal sources, just to cover that quickly as well. So we've got examples where we've run a trial previously where we proactively attended properties who have reported previous issues with LCDM. We called it our property MOT programme. We're currently in the process of reviewing that trial data, but part of that process was to treat any LCDM issues that were identified, raising the outstanding works on the system without the customer having to make contact into the contact centre or the online reporting tool themselves. And we've got the frontline staff out and about as well, who have all now been trained in identifying LCDM issues and the processes for reporting these for repairs. It means that if we attend the property for any reason in any capacity as part of Clarion and see that there's an LCDM issue, it can be promptly raised and booked in with the customer there, and then taking some of that onus and pressure off the residents and the customers themselves to try and have to do that, and offering that additional support. So once we've got those reports, with the initial attendance, how does that look? So no matter what the source is, the first step, as mentioned previously, is to arrange for an LCDM trade operative, so one of the operatives to go out and attend. They'll form an initial assessment of the cause and treat any issues identified. And it's really important, and we drill this into our guys out and about, to do that, to remove any potential harmful mould spores as soon as possible on our first attendance, using those specialist products to try and minimise that spread. Obviously, the longer we leave things like mould, the bigger and more of an issue they become. They just continue to grow and grow and grow under the right conditions. So it's really, really important that the guys out there get the treatments allocated and completed first time. They'll take photos, obviously before and after any treatment, so we can kind of document what we're coming across and how we've managed to treat it or not been able to do. They'll complete the initial report on the issues that they've come across, and then they'll update the systems with the relevant supporting documents and notes. If they identify that there's other works that need completing, then they'll arrange those works as well from site. So they'll make a call into our planning teams and ask that they provide a new date for somebody to return and complete whatever's outstanding. If they feel like it needs further investigation, so they've not been able to identify what the cause is, or it's particularly challenging, the conditions are particularly bad, then, as we've mentioned, they'll request a surveyor to attend, and that surveyor will complete that report that Dean's been through in some detail there. That request must be approved by an area manager, and the system must have the relevant details, so they're updated with the rationale, the supporting comments, the photos, the initial report, all that sort of stuff. So the surveyor goes fully equipped, really, knowing what they're going to come across, and can almost be ahead of the game before they get there. And then as part of that surveyor visit, they'll attend an appointment that's booked in by Kim's team. So it's all obviously done at the customer's convenience and availability. Kim's resident liaison officers will book that in with that surveyor, and they'll do that full survey of the property, including some of the additional checks that Dean's mentioned, taking the damp meter readings, using the heat loss detection equipment or the other specialist tools to really understand what the likely cause is and how we're going to be able to resolve it. The surveyors will then arrange any of that follow-on work, so any of that work that's required to provide that long-term solution and minimise the risk of the issues returning, and then they'll monitor those works through to completion. And it's quite important to kind of acknowledge that these concerns, these LCDM issues are quite often really, really difficult to identify the root cause of. So we'll always try our best to get these done, but sometimes we do have to go back and we do have to get a surveyor involved again and have another look and see what we can do to resolve these for the long term, because that is the real key here. If we can move on to the next slide, I think it might be back to Kim.
So the LCDM work order is raised and completed. If that's the first point of contact and no other work orders are raised, you will get a follow-up text to check if the issue is resolved after 28 days. This was a big discussion point actually in the resident focus group around follow-up and it being longer than 28 days. So I've taken that back and we're now looking into what other follow-up we can do in terms of our LCDM cases. As Martin said, we'll revisit and get that booked in if needed, or if the surveyor require it does then come into my team. We'll introduce ourselves and be a central point of contact. So if you do need to rearrange your appointment, you can do that through the team, and then we'll keep you updated on what's going on, which I will move to the next slide, Helen, and talk about the resident liaison officer a little bit. Thank you. So they will be chasing and working out what's going on with the works that have been raised in regards to your LCDM case. So we'll be speaking to Martin, we'll be speaking to his area managers, and we'll be trying to find out what's going on and keeping you updated on that. So we'll give you our phone number, we'll speak to you about how often you want to be called, if you want to be emailed only, if you just want text message updates, but we will be that point of contact keeping you updated. And we'll give you a clear action plan right at the beginning about what we're going to do, how often we're going to call you, so that you know that we're going to do that for you. We'll assist and support our surveyors, so we'll speak to the contractors sometimes to find out how long they think the works are going to take, so we can let you know that. And then we will follow up, as I've mentioned, to make sure that it's resolved and nothing's come back. If it has, I'll be speaking to Martin probably again, getting his team to go back and have a look into it. Like I mentioned, I have taken back the feedback we got in our first resident focus group on that follow-up, and that perhaps that 28 days isn't long enough. So perhaps we could make it longer and follow up with you at a later date. We'll give you that advice and support that Dean mentioned, and refer you to money guidance, digital support team, whoever we need to. So yeah, we will be the point of contact. We'll coordinate across lots of different teams and we'll make sure we keep you updated on what's going on.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kim, and thank you to all of our speakers this evening. We're now going to move on to the question and answer session. So just a reminder, the presentations were focused on the things you all asked us to talk about, how the role of the resident liaison officer works, the role of the surveyor, what LCDM is. So hopefully you've found those presentations useful. Okay, so these questions were all submitted by many of you, and the first question, the first couple of questions are to Dean. So Dean, we've had somebody ask about extractor fans, and the question is, I don't have an extractor fan in my bathroom and can't install one. Leaving windows open in the winter is not cost effective. What else can I do?
Okay, so most of the moisture that's produced in our homes is when we're at home, especially when we're bathing or cooking, producing excess moisture. This is the most important time to be ventilating our property. Again, having the correct balance of heating and ventilation is vital. Other options to assist with reducing moisture build-up in the kitchen and bathroom, especially when bathing or cooking, is opening the window throughout the duration of the activity, or when running a bath, turn on the cold tap first, as this will reduce the amount of excess moisture being produced within that area. Also, another helpful tip is, did you know that there's a variety of plants that can be placed in and around your home to reduce moisture, dew and mould, such as orchids, which benefit from moisture and thrive in humidity levels of between 60 to 80%, along with a number of other plants that absorb excess moisture, remove toxins and purify the air, such as the English ivy, peace lily, fern and spider plants. But Clarion is aware that there may be some properties that don't have an extractor fan. But if there is space to install one, then we would have a conversation with the resident to look at installing one. although this would be a slightly different process if it was a leasehold property. In this instance, we would advise the leaseholder to check their lease, then contact Clarion to discuss making any alterations or improvements to their property, which would then would need to be followed up by making a permission request, including details of the works they intend to carry out, duration of the works, contractor details, and evidence of public liability, etc., prior to any works commencing. This would then be reviewed alongside the lease and a surveyor visit carried out if deemed necessary prior to any decision being made.
Thank you, Dean. So we've also had a question on underlying causes. Actually, I think a few people have asked this, and I think this is a really good question. So how do you make sure you're dealing with the underlying cause and not just managing the issue? So I think this is more about preventing it happening in the first place than curing it in the second place. How would you answer that one?
I mean, as described through the presentation, the MTO would carry out their initial visit and look at carrying out any treatments that are required and then raise any follow-on works. But if they deem that the works are more complex and there's been multiple visits, then obviously there's an underlying root cause. And that's when the specialist surveyor would go out, visit the property, look at all the fabric of the building internally, externally, look at how what current heating is in the property, what ventilation systems are in there, and then see if anything needs upgrading, and use their specialist equipment to look at cold spots, cold bridging, any leaks that are hidden.
Okay, thanks, Dean. So just for everybody listening, MTO, that's multi-trade operatives. That's our Clarion response operatives who come in and do works in your property or in your block. So Kim, question for you. So this is about resolving the root cause of leaks, and I think this is where maybe sometimes we get a leak from one property above another. So what does Clarion do to make sure we're resolving the root cause of leaks which originate from outside the affected home?
So it is complex when it comes to leaks coming from other areas of the building. And I was just going to talk a little bit about a case that we've actually, I think, still got going at the moment, where it was a ground floor flat and there was a leak coming through. And we thought, obviously, it would be the flat above. So we went there, we fixed what we thought was the problem, only to find that the leak came back again. We had some access issues with the flat above, went back again and thought we'd fix the problem again, and it reappeared. And actually, it wasn't the flat above, it was flats further along. So we then had to go in and investigate every property to try and find and resolve this leak. So we refer it into the RLO team, we manage it effectively, we keep the customers updated, but it's not as easy as, you know, sometimes it's just not as easy to fix it first time. Yeah. So we'll raise it as a case and we'll manage that through. And we will try and resolve the root cause of the leak as soon as we possibly can.
Thanks, Kim. I think that was a point Martin was making right at the end there, that it's not always obvious when we go in to look at a property or another property where the leak is coming from. But the most important thing is we don't give up. We keep searching until we've resolved it. Thank you for that. Martin, just a few questions for you now. And there's one about responsibility for decorating. So what's a resident responsibility where we're doing redecoration works following damp and mould? What happens there?
Yeah, so I think it's important to understand that Clarion as a whole, we don't like to apportion blame. We don't apportion blame, particularly when it comes to damp and mould. So we'll never say that this is down to the resident. It's, you know, it's your fault, your problem. We're always here to help and support, and we'll resolve those issues, and then we'll work our way through that. But I think we're in a really good position now where we've learned from those previous experiences, and with our current model for handling these types of repairs, we'll always look to resolve that issue long term, as we've mentioned, and then give that guidance and support. But when it comes to the redecoration after, any repairs are completed, it's always Clarion's responsibility to make sure that property is in a good condition and ready to be decorated by the customers to their own specific taste. By keeping a standard policy in place, it kind of helps that prevention of the back and forth communications about who should or shouldn't be completing the works. And it also gives everybody the same opportunity really, decorating their own styles. They're not stuck with what we go in and would do.
Thanks, Martin. So the next question, and this is one I'd really like to know the answer to. This is about, it's a great question about leaking pipes that affect more than one room in a property, and how we look at that in terms of urgency over maybe one where it's just affecting one room. So the question was, how does Clarion assess the level of risk with leaks, and does this affect Clarion's response time? For example, where there were leaking of pipes affecting more than one room in a property.
Yeah, so that is a great question. So in relation to leaks, there are 2 service level agreements that we have in place for attendance times. These are 24 hours for emergencies, similar to any other kind of emergency, or up to 28 days for non-emergencies. But sometimes it can be hard to differentiate between those 2 categories. So to try and simplify, I would say that if a leak's uncontainable, then it's classed as an emergency. If it's containable, then it's generally deemed as a non-emergency. In relation to that specific question around multiple leaks in a single property, it would depend still on if they were containable or non-containable. But having said that, we risk assess all of the repairs that come into the contact centre or handled by the call handlers. They ask the probing questions, they try to get to the bottom of exactly what the correct category and risk assessment is right at the start. And if they feel that the issue should be treated as an emergency for another reason, then they can use their discretion and raise it as such. And I would also quickly say that you'll notice that I said that non-emergencies are up to 28 days. It doesn't mean that they'll be waiting 28 days for us to get out and resolve it. It means it's up to that. But again, if that repair is deemed to be more pressing, such as the multiple leaks, for instance, but not quite an emergency, then the call taker or call handler may ask the planning team or the area manager to try and book that in urgently for attendance and bring it forward as a priority. And also, if those leaks are causing mould, then that would be separate and that would be attended by the LCDM team specifically. And we'd class those either as 7-day or 28-day response time. So it can get a bit confusing, a bit complicated, but again, it's all based on severity of the issue, so the severity of the mould, location of the issue, customer vulnerability. So we take everything on a case-by-case basis.
Thanks, Martin. Just last one for you before I move on to Dean again. So this question's about value for money, and that's not wasting money. So how can Clarion make sure they're effectively managing their repairs and are wasting money through delayed completion of works? For example, scaffolding erection with no works completed. What can we do in that area?
Again, great question again. So we're always focused on providing great value for money as an organisation. It's one of our key sort of aims to provide that for our customers. It's achieved many different ways, but we need to be efficient. We need to ensure that the repairs are effective, and in order to do that, we monitor what's called a WIP report, or a work in progress report, which allows us to see individual repairs for each property and track the progress of each of those. So that's regularly checked, and also monitoring what materials are being bought and used by the operatives, what the quantities are to prevent wastage, and make sure the right materials are being used for each of the repairs. I would say, though, that we do acknowledge that this is an area we're always working to improve on. We know that often communication between teams or departments can lead to delays with outstanding works or not being raised, or a lack of ownership. And that's something we're working really closely with Kim's RLO team to try and change and provide customers with a better overall experience. And I think in this example given here, scaffold being left up after a roof repair, it's the kind of thing that Kim's team would quite quickly flag to us after a conversation with the customer. If it's gone amiss, they'd raise that to the repairs manager. We can address that quite quickly, and the managers would still be monitoring that WIP specifically for scaffolds, easy for you to say, because it's something that's looked at very regularly. There's health and safety things with scaffolds as well as high costs. So that example there is a good one, but they are well monitored, and like I say, Kim's team are pretty good at picking those kind of things up and referring them in to us to make sure we're providing that good value for money for our customers.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. It is a good question, because obviously every additional day scaffold is up, it costs us a little bit more money. So I'm glad of your answer there. Thank you for that. So Dean, we've got a question on guttering, and this is another great question. What should residents do if they feel that works that have previously been identified as needing to be completed just aren't getting done? For example, replacement and regular clearing of gutters, which can cause damage to properties. What would you say to that?
I think Martin covered some of it in the last question,
He did.
I would advise anyone, if they've got any issues or concerns, to give Clarion a call, make Clarion aware of what the issues are, and speak to the contact centre, who will raise either a new repair, chase up an existing repair, or arrange for a contract to reattend if something hasn't been done properly. At Clarion, you know, we understand that there may be occasions where we may miss something, or where works have not been completed or not to the correct standard. And then if the resident feels that they need to raise these issues and concerns, then they can discuss this with our LCDM RLOs, who will work with them to resolve these issues, to make sure that it gets moving and things get done that need to get done.
Great, thanks, Dean. Last question for you tonight, and then we've got one more after that. We've not really talked about dehumidifiers tonight.
Yeah.
Will dehumidifiers be lent to get rid of moisture in homes? Is that something we do?
Okay, right. So at Clarion, we review the need for dehumidifiers on a case-by-case basis to assist with the drying out of damp areas that have suffered from excess moisture due to, say, a leak or a flood. Where we do feel that it's necessary to install a dehum, then we'd look to reimburse a resident for their electricity at a rate of £6 per day. Although installing a dehum can assist with this drying out period and reducing the moisture, it's not a long-term solution in the management of the moisture in our homes, and this is why it's important to identify and resolve the root cause, which will then make the dehumidifier unnecessary in an ongoing management of the property. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you, Dean. And the last question of the night, and this is my favourite one. This is to you, Martin. So this is about smelling damp in a property. Perhaps when you can't see it, maybe it's behind the kitchen cupboard, behind the sofa, whatever it happens to be. So, will Clarion attend my property if I can only smell damp but can't see any visual signs of damp or mould? So would we attend in that situation?
I could give the really simple answer, couldn't I? And the answer is yes. You know, that's it. Yes, we would attend, but I'll be a bit more generous. Yeah, of course we would. Yeah, absolutely. Dean's mentioned it in part of his presentation. The smell of damp can often be the first sign that there is a problem. Maybe able to smell the damp before seeing the physical signs of it. It could be that, like you said there, Ian, it's behind some larger furniture or in a kitchen cupboard. So we would attend. We do the full investigation, as we've mentioned previously. Find the cause of that smell. Most likely would find a visible patch of damp or mould somewhere within the property, and then we'd look to treat that, find out what the cause of that is, and resolve that long-term cause, as we mentioned throughout. Resolve that long-term cause might mean we need a surveyor to attend, as we've already covered, but yeah, absolutely, we would still attend just to smell rather than seeing physical signs of it.
Great answer. Thank you, Martin. Right, that brings us to the end of the question and answer session. So I'm now just going to sum up before we close the webinar. So some of you did ask some individual questions, and as I said at the beginning of the webinar, we will follow up with you individually because they're things we couldn't cover directly during the session this evening. So you will hear from us on that. Many of the questions were answered in the presentation and in the Q&A just now, but if you do have further queries, please do let us know, and you'll see through the webinar how you can contact us. We will be undertaking a survey after tonight. As I said at the beginning, this is our first of a series of webinars. We do want to do more webinars on lots of other different topics, so please do feedback on the content of what you heard tonight, and whether or not you think the concept of doing a webinar is a good thing, and what things you might like to hear from us in the future. That just leaves me to thank all of the staff who've been on tonight and presented and helped put the webinar together. So thank you to you. Thank you to residents who joined the webinar tonight and members of the customer committee. Thank you to you too. I really do hope you've enjoyed the session and you've got something out of it. So that just leaves me to say thanks again and good night. So good night. Thank you.